Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Zero Project Forum on Climate Change and Humanitarian Crises. My name is Marcie ROTH, and I am the Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of the World Institute on Disability. WID is one of the oldest disability rights organizations in the world, founded and continually led by people with disabilities since 1983. We have also launched the Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration, and I will be talking a little bit about both organizations later on. This forum is a particularly urgent discussion, and we appreciate everyone joining us today. The world is in crisis. We are all well aware of that. And for people with disabilities, 1.3 billion people with disabilities across the globe, we are being left behind. This is unacceptable, and in the context of emergencies and disasters, conflict, and other crises, it is inexcusable that we are not at the table, that we are not at the head of the table, leading the discussions that will not only benefit people with disabilities, but are the key to sustainability and resilience for every community in every corner of the globe. This morning, I am joined by several wonderful speakers, and I will briefly introduce each of them. They will speak with you, and then I will take the opportunity to talk a little bit about the work that the World Institute on Disability is doing and the Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration. We are joined today by Michael LORZ, who is the Managing Director of the EnableMe Foundation in Switzerland, and his co-presenter, Oleksandra ZHURAKHIVSKA, hope I got that right, who is with EnableMe Ukraine. She is joining us online. EnableMe has launched a local platform in 6 countries, and Michael LORZ will present the platform active in Ukraine that monthly reaches more than 150,000 persons. Before we turn to Michael, I will introduce our other speakers. Michaela KROEMER, who is the CEO of Access Israel. Michal will present the Purple Vest mission that is implemented by Access Israel. Vicky TSANG is the coordinator of the Pacific Gender and Economic Inclusion International Finance Corporation, IFC, in Australia, and Vicky will as well be talking about the critically important issues around gender and economic inclusion. Let me first turn to Michael and Oleksandra.
Thank you, Marcie, for this wonderful introduction. So my name is Michael, and I do have this privilege to lead EnableMe. EnableMe is all about information, enabling people with disabilities and closed networks with relevant information, and establishing online peer communities where people can help each other. In April 22, after a quick assessment and after the war has started in Ukraine, we launched EnableMe Ukraine for exactly that purpose. And I must say, I should not talk too much because the protagonist is Alex or Sasha, who is actually at the moment in Kiev for negotiations with ministers. But what I want to say is, in the monthly average of people who have used our services in 2022 was 5,000 users per month. In January 24, we have had 500,000 unique users, which is a 100x growth. And it's also a testament to what is happening with an immense growth of people with disabilities in Ukraine, and therefore an urgent need to actually react and act on that. And with that having said, I want to hand the floor over to you, Alex.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity of being here. I'm very sorry for my strange background. Actually, right now I'm in only place in Kyiv which is both safe and has good connections. That's why I will try to tell you about the EnableMe Ukraine in the best way, with the feeling from Kyiv, from Ukraine, from all the needs Ukrainians have nowadays. First of all you know that before the war in Ukraine, there were 2.7 million Ukrainians with disabilities. And when the war started, more than 1 million of those Ukrainians with disabilities became refugees. It means that all of those people, they appeared abroad alone with no information, not understanding where to go, where to get help, support, and any specific services they need. And unfortunately, the quantity of persons with disabilities are growing every day on a constant way, because as you know, a lot of militarians become persons with disabilities. A lot of civilians, because of war actions, become persons with disabilities. And in 2024, the official number of the persons with disabilities in Ukraine reached 3.1 million people. And we see that it's increasing from day to day, unfortunately. So EnableMe Ukraine conducted research, and we are doing this research actually monthly, because it's the basic way to understand the needs of Ukrainians with disabilities. And for today, we understand the top needs of Ukrainians with disabilities both abroad and on the territory of Ukraine are relocation in a refugee country, official confirmation of disability abroad, also confirmation of a disability and getting the status of a person with disability in Ukraine for those who just became disabled, job search in Ukraine and in European Union countries, because Ukrainians with disabilities, they won't stay active, stay alive, to take part in everyday's life, and they are cool in this wish to love with their eyes burning, and it's great. And supporting Ukrainians, we see this wish, and it inspires us a lot. Plus, the basic need of Ukrainians is housing of a displaced person in Ukraine, housing in European Union countries. So I can share with you more and more of these needs, but what I want to say, EnableMe Ukraine actually renews this data, maybe weekly, sometimes every day, and we understand it great because also we have the feedback from the users of our community. In April 2022, after the war started in Ukraine, EnableMe launched EnableMe Ukraine informational portal and online community. Next slide, please. And via our informational and online services, people with disabilities, they got information actually about all spheres of their life, about all the top needs they have, and even more. They found friends, they found support, they found peer support from the person who faced the same situation, who has already got bruises in some difficult life situations, and they know how to avoid getting bruises for others. And it's tremendously important for those people who are in this crucial life moment. Next slide, please. And I think also next. So I want to share our impact since our launch, because these numbers are mostly inspiring me every day. When I start my working day, first of all, I look on our data, and then I understand that we're doing the job which is really needed, and it pushes me to do more and to support more people, to create more content, to answer more questions. So since our launch in April 2022, we had more than 3,150,000 unique users on our platform. It means that we had, for today, it's about 1,000 community members, more than 3,000 questions, answers, discussions, all the activities we had in our community, and more than 300 content pieces with the actually needed information, which were created on the basis of needs we were researching. So, and also I am very proud of our official partnership with the biggest Ukrainian organization, which is about the rights and needs of the persons with disabilities. It's called the National Assembly of Persons with Disabilities of Ukraine. We collaborate with them in a very strong way, and they help us to stay in touch. As fast as possible. As soon Ukrainians have some needs, we know about them like on first hour, let's say, and we know which kind of content should be created to respond these needs. Next slide, please. Thanks to all activities EnableMe Ukraine made previous year in 2023, for today, we are very proud to say that we helped more than 1 million Ukrainians. It means that those people were searching actually needed information on our platform, and they got the answers on the questions that were important for them in our community. Next slide, please. I want to share with you just few stories of Ukrainians which are going to us, which are asking information, but there are not maybe thousands of them, and they're not typical. Actually, that's why our community has its great value, because we are finding for people information which is not typical, which they cannot find in Google, or they can, but they need make research maybe 2-3 hours, and sometimes it's impossible because of not possibility to connect to good Wi-Fi. They are not having.
Sorry.
And so, first of all, the story of Ukrainian. Militarian, the wife of Ukrainian militarian, she asked us how to get a status of person with disability for her man and to get rehabilitation. We supported her. I'm sorry for this timing, because I'm leaving this project. So next year our plans are the same. We're gonna support Ukrainians in our best way in all the spheres, both abroad and on the territory of Ukraine. And we are very appreciate any kind of support, because this significant contribution EnableMe is making, it improves the lives of Ukrainians. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Oleksandra.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Alex, for leading this really important initiative. What I wanted to highlight, what is really interesting, is the access to people with disabilities, and on the other hand, the strong data analytics. So the interesting part is that we can see live what are the needs, and the team, who is consisting now of 6 people with a lot of volunteers, can really respond very quickly on what is needed. And so, well, again, thank you. We have a white book. If you have any questions, we can share this white book on needs, what we have discovered last year. And so thank you to everyone. Thanks.
Thank you to both of you. The work that EnableMe is doing in Ukraine and in many parts of the world is very important. And hearing from Alex about the work that you all are doing in Ukraine, I think hits very close to home for those of us who have as well been supporting the people of Ukraine. Slava Ukrainia. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Michal RIMON from Access Israel.
Thank you very much, and I'm joining you in the friend part, because one of the amazing things of being, first of all, here at Zero Project every year, and also the work we're doing offline from this conference, friendship is the base of it, and together we will be stronger. So thank you very much. I'm, as always, excited and happy to have the stage at Zero Project, a place where we can share best practices. And I'm happy this year specifically because last year the Purple Vest mission was awarded a special award, and it's always great to get an award, but to come a year later and tell you, guys, it works. It really works with what has happened in Israel in the last 5 months or so. So we are talking about climate change, not only humanitarian crisis and times of war, but the model works, and I'm happy to share. The clickers, thank you. So whoever hasn't seen this, very short, let's try. I guess the video doesn't work.
Ah, technology.
Yes. So while we're preparing for that, I can tell you that the purple, as you know, is a color identified with people with disabilities, with the message leaving no one behind. The idea behind the purple vest is taking that message and putting it on a vest, making sure that people who are wearing the vests know to identify, know to communicate, know to assist people with disabilities in times of emergency. And the sooner we do it, the sooner we prepare, the easier it will be when the times are getting tough. Should I wait for the video or? No problem. So I'll be more than happy to share, or you're invited to go to the Purple Vest website and see it there. So, you know, just in the last 4 or 5 years, we have been seeing climate change events all over the world, whether it's wildfires, heat waves, cold waves, earthquakes, and of course also terror attacks and wars, as we just heard from Ukraine. And the idea is this should be a wake-up call for us all. This is something we cannot overlook, and we have to understand that it can happen anywhere, anytime, to anyone. And believe me, I've been saying that in the last year around the world, and October 7th, I felt it even more. Now, even when you have adequate early warning signs, alerts, we still know, and this is from the UN DRR survey in 2023, 17% of people with disability will still face a lot of difficulties evacuating even with early warning. 6% will not be able to evacuate independently. Now, we have to keep that in mind because it's very important to have the early warning signing, but still, it's not enough to stop there. Now, when we are talking, as mentioned before, we're talking about the leaving no one behind. In times of emergency, the bottom line is people are left behind. If we just heard about Ukraine, I can tell you the thing that hit me when we started dealing with the war in Ukraine was a simple procedure that whenever you wanted to evacuate from Ukraine, you reached the border, you had to get off the bus 2 kilometers from the border and start walking. March, cold, ice, snow, doesn't matter if you're an elderly person or a person with disability, you had to walk for 2 kilometers or roll it for 2 kilometers. That was the generic solution, and generic does not work for people with disabilities in times of emergency necessarily. And this is the fine-tuning we need to make sure, and I totally join Marcie in the call, you can't do it without us. You can't do it without listening, hearing people with disability, and really understanding and having them at the table, head of the table, I even love that more, but part of the discussion. Now, the Purple Vest methodology is talking about accessible management in times of emergency. It can be on a local, national, global scale. I can tell you, we have been advising even buildings, companies, to really do even a small scale, but make sure you are prepared as an employer when you have people, and the statistics are there also in the workplace. We include awareness to inclusion, because you have to be aware to understand this has to be on the agenda. You have to have the information accessible in all formats and in accessible formats, of course. And training, the human factor, as I said, the purple vesters, whether it's purple vesters in your organization, in your municipality, in your country, and of course, the methodology for professional task force. We started doing it in Ukraine, and I can tell you that an hour and a half after the siren hit on October 7th, we started doing it in Israel. We had the methodology there. We knew what to do. We had it prepared, and that is what helped us jump into the water immediately. Now, I always say that if I have to sum up Purple Vest, I always use these 4 images. The mirror is here to remind us all, look in the mirror, guys. It's not a lecture about something that happens in Ukraine or in other parts of the world. It can happen to you too. It can happen anywhere, trust me. So let's make it about us. Let's make it about preparing so we and our loved ones will be not left behind. And the ear is here to remind us not just to hear it, people with disabilities and elderly and their needs, but really listen. And the wheel is there to remind us not to reinvent the wheel. In any case, in any place, there are local organizations that we can leverage on, that we can join, that we can enforce, that we can, join hands, connect the dots is the first image, and really make sure we're efficient and we do it right. Now, Access Israel, ooh, I'm bad with time. So we have been operating in Israel for 24 years, promoting accessibility. In times of regular times, we know that whenever there's an obstacle, we overcome it and we try to find solutions. In times of emergency, you cannot settle for something that is less than a full sequence, and you always have to overcome it with all kinds of solutions. The model talks about 3 things. Preparedness, as I mentioned, we have to be prepared and do everything in advance. Think about your generic procedures and try to see where the problems can occur and really try to make sure that the information in advance, the training in advance is all there. In Israel, there were solutions set for evacuation places. Make sure those places are accessible. I can tell you in other places around the world we visited, we saw that there were problems because people did not think, in Przemyśl in Poland, there was 1 accessible toilet for 1,500 people, and you know how many showers? 0. So this is something we need to take into account. The next thing is the real-time assistance. And here, again, I'll try to sum up in 1 sentence. Thank you, maybe 2. Real-time assistance means really, and this is what we were discussing, it's really to create a sequence that starts from the information, the personalization and customization, looking at the person itself, not just the block of people with disabilities, and trying to find some generic solutions for disabilities, but really looking at each case and really making sure that, and this is something we learned from last year, evacuation is not enough, it doesn't stop there. When you're talking about evacuating people with disabilities, you're basically displacing them from their regular communities. We have to make sure that they are taken care of and their needs are met in the places they are at now. And we need to understand that this is something that cannot be overlooked. I would like to say 1 more sentence about the civil society. I can tell you that I saw it in Ukraine, I saw it in Africa, I saw it in Turkey, and I see it now in Israel. Civil society is less bureaucratic, they're more connected to the people themselves, and they are powerhouses when they do it right. When we don't pull the blanket only to our people, but we look around us, and we make sure that solutions are there for us all. Accessibility is about finding the balance between the needs for various disabilities. And the last thing, which is, great statistics, you're invited to our website, and I'd love to elaborate on that, but the aftermath. And this is something that is very important. I saw the statistics EnableMe presented about the number of people with disabilities that were joining in Ukraine. I can tell you in Israel we're already talking about thousands of new disabled people. We have to remember that it is our commitment to make sure that getting back to life will be done in the best way possible. And it's not just looking at reconstruction physically, but really looking at the needs of the people. And I will end here. Sorry.
Thank you very much. This is such important work, and I think the growth that you all have unfortunately had to undertake will serve both the people of your country and the world as we all move forward to prepare for the unexpected.
Next thing, yeah.
Yeah, the next thing. And let me now welcome Vicky TSANG, and I will turn to you.
Thank you, Marcie. Do you mind if I?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So I guess I'll start with thanking everybody. It's my first time here, and I'm so glad I'm here, and hopefully this won't be the last. I guess I'll start with the statement that people living in Pacific Island nations are already experiencing climate change. And I'm going to illustrate that with a little story. So 2 weeks ago, I was in Solomon Islands, and I met with Casper, who leads the People with Disabilities Solomon Islands. I asked him whether he's got anything he'd like to share with this audience in relation to the impact of climate change. And so he immediately told me about how he recently had to help relocate and resettle a couple of people with disabilities who live on a few islands in Lower Lagoon and Langa Langa Lagoon. Their homes are underwater because of sea swells, which is an impact of climate change. Ironically, Langa Langa means dry, and so this is just one small example of how it is already impacting people. But before I dive a little deeper, I'll just have a quick introduction on who IFC is. We are the private sector development arm of the World Bank, and we aim to improve the lives of people in developing countries by investing in private sector growth and by creating inclusive economic opportunities. I'm specifically from the IFC Gender and Economic Inclusion Department, where we work to reduce gaps between men and women in the private sector and enable companies and economies to improve their performance. We do that by providing advisory services, produce tools and reports, and so that we can build the business case for inclusion and integrate a gender lens in our investments. Here's a few photographs of people that we have helped through our program. So for example, I have a photo of women in high-vis vests and helmets working in non-traditional jobs, children in childcare centers through a program on employer-supported childcare. What we've seen is that when we create more inclusive workplaces and more inclusive private sector, there is economic benefits and returns on investment in terms of increased productivity and increased employee engagement, and also higher retention and stability for people who are the end beneficiaries of our work. Back to climate change. As I mentioned earlier, the islands in the Pacific are extremely vulnerable to climate change. The impacts include loss of coastal infrastructure and land, more frequent and more intense cyclones, failure of crops and coastal fisheries, loss of coral reefs and mangroves, and the spread of certain diseases. These events both create vulnerability and exacerbate existing vulnerability, and people with disabilities are already some of the most socially and economically excluded people in the communities and the countries that we work in. They face a myriad of attitudinal and physical barriers on a daily basis. And the impact of climate change on their lived environments exacerbate the existing inequities. To just give you a few statistics as an illustration, on average in Asia Pacific, people with disabilities are 2 to 6 times less likely than persons without disabilities to be employed. On top of that, they are up to 4 times more likely to die or be injured in a disaster. There are slightly more women than men who are disabled, probably due to the intersecting factors of gender and low resource settings. So if you are a family and you have to provide medical assistance, quite often the female child would get less out of the pool of the resources. So what is our response to this? We believe that increasing the economic inclusion of people with disabilities will increase their resilience against the impact of climate change and increase people's abilities to adapt. By economic inclusion, I mean increased access to finance, increased labor force participation, and increased access to markets, to give you a few examples. So last year, funded by the governments of Australia and New Zealand, we did a scoping study to find out what is the current state of disability inclusion in the private sector in 4 Pacific countries, which are Vanuatu, Fiji, Solomon Islands, and Papua New Guinea. We found that the private sector still has a very nascent understanding of disability. They view it mostly as a charity model, and they don't have any workplace policies in place addressing accessibility or reasonable accommodation. They don't view people with disabilities as a source of talent, although almost all of them have employed or are employing people with disabilities and have provided some sort of accommodation due to need. From a service and products provision point of view, they have not thought about inclusive design at all. But despite of widespread attitudinal barriers, for example, in Papua New Guinea, it is quite common to believe that people with disabilities are cursed. At a senior management level, companies we interviewed are very open to taking steps towards disability inclusive employment or design of products and services. But they told us that they would need a lot of support because they wouldn't know where to start. We also saw some very successful examples of employment of people with disabilities. And where there is a successful example, it's due to the fact that the employees and the employer are suitably prepared. The Organization of People with Disabilities, OPDs for short, that we have interviewed said they haven't really engaged with the private sector in terms of employment, livelihoods, or the design of products and services. They also told us that their capacity is a bit stretched because most of them work on a voluntary basis, and everybody would come who would work in the country on disability inclusion efforts would go to them, and so they are very stretched in terms of the demand for the time and energy. So what's next? In partnership with the Solomon Islands Chamber of Commerce and Industry and also the People with Disabilities Solomon Islands, we will bring a group of companies, larger and mid-sized companies in Solomon Islands together in a peer learning program that will help support the companies make commitments to increase inclusion in recruitment, retention, and promotion of women and people with disabilities. They will attend periodic workshops and be supported with guidance in their action plans over a period of 18 months. And they will be able to share practices and knowledge with each other as they go along. We will also help build the capacity of the national OPD and increase their ability to interact with the private sector, and offer training services to the companies. So in summary, climate change is already impacting people's lives. And on top of inclusive disaster risk reduction and planning, we need to mobilize the private sector to play a role in advancing the economic inclusion of people with disabilities so that we can build more resilient communities. And I welcome any suggestions, pointers, or if anybody's done any similar work, please do share your experience. My email address is up there, and I'll be around today and tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. The work that you all are doing in the Pacific is work that I think is being recognized globally. the World Bank continues to lead the way. You all continue to lead the way in really shining a light on not only the crisis of climate change, but the imperatives that people with disabilities are leading disaster risk reduction. Yeah, thank you. Again, I'm Marcie ROTH, and I am with the World Institute on Disability, and I'm now going to talk a little bit about the work that we are doing. If I could have the, thank you, thank you, thank you. Technology. So let me make sure I am doing this correctly. There we go. The World Institute on Disability is, our mission is to continually advance the rights and opportunities of over 1.3 billion people with disabilities. And among the work that we do is accessibility, universal design solutions, emergency preparedness, disaster risk reduction, climate resilience, and policies, tools, and services for global community living. We have key guiding principles. We are disability-led. We are focused on accelerating inclusion. We have a pan-disability movement solidarity commitment. We are intersectional and cross-cultural in our belief in the competency of people with disabilities. Our ethics, integrity, and accountability are of the utmost importance, and advancing human rights and supporting disability justice across the lifespan is among our guiding principles. The frequency, intensity, duration, and impact of disasters is growing exponentially, driven by climate change, public health emergencies, conflict, and other threats. We have been focusing on how people with disabilities can not only be centered in the priorities of impacted communities around the world, but that we are in fact in leadership roles. The Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration, which is an alliance of disability-led organizations, foundations, corporations, and humanitarian actors. We collaborate to accelerate solutions for disaster-impacted disability organizations and the disabled people they serve. We provide an alternative to the traditional model where very little, if any, humanitarian assistance reaches disability-led organizations. And we maximize on the expertise of disability-led organizations in their communities, creating partnerships instead of charity. We operate a virtual emergency operations center, and this operations center is an accessible online resource for organizations led by people with disabilities in disaster-impacted communities and humanitarian actors who would like to support the work of the local folks on the ground who are very often most knowledgeable about their community, the resources, and how to best serve the disaster impact, not only for people with disabilities, but for the whole community. Over the 3.5 years since we first launched the Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration, we have supported disability-led organizations in Colombia, Puerto Rico, in the southern US, in Haiti, in the Russian invasion of Ukraine, in Turkey and Syria, and we are currently, we have been requested by disability-led organizations in Afghanistan, Libya, Morocco, Mexico, in Gaza, Israel, and Chile to support, again, disability-led organizations so that they can serve their communities. They have needs for resources for maintaining and resuming continuity of operations, financial management, gap analysis, staffing, monitoring and evaluation, disability equipment and supplies, communication equipment and technical assistance, accessible transportation, accessible temporary and permanent housing, public awareness, in-country partnerships, language access, culturally appropriate mental health, psychosocial assistance, training and technical assistance from experienced disability-led organizations. I would love to tell you that the work of disability-led organizations is very well supported, but the reality is that almost no funding in the billions of dollars in humanitarian assistance that is distributed in disasters, the incredible generosity and kindness of the world's people in supporting humanitarian action. Virtually none of that support goes directly to disability-led organizations on the ground and organizations like the Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration working to center the expertise and leadership of those organizations. The work that the Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration is doing it's difficult, it's lonely work, and we are working to transform the humanitarian processes so that the work that is being done by the people closest to the pain is also being supported by the people closest to the power. In fact, I can say that almost no one comes to us in the midst of a disaster and says, how can we support the folks on the ground? I do have to call out the Kessler Foundation and Elaine Katz, who happens to be in the back of the room, because time and again, the Kessler Foundation has come to us without us asking. They have come to us and said, can we support local disability-led organizations on the ground? And that is so rare. And we ask all of you to look to the humanitarian partners that you're working with and ask them, how are they supporting those disability-led organizations? How are we able to support the folks on the ground who are doing that work in their community? This is not just good for people with disabilities. This is what makes our communities stronger. And if you would like to learn more about the World Institute on Disability and the Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration, I'm sharing contact information. I thank you very much for the opportunity for all of the speakers to be with you today. And we do have some time for questions, and then we will have a closing summary presented to us. Questions? Don't be shy. We got it all solved? Everything's fixed? We're good? Well, then I will ask a couple of questions. And I know, Michal, you had wanted very much to talk about technology issues.
Yes.
So,
first of all, I want to join what you said. What you said about the Kessler Foundation, and I think that in times of emergency, when really the times are tough, it is those supporters that see you and provide to what you need. In our case, it was an email I received the second day of the war, or third day of the war, from Seneca, saying, what do you need? I said what I needed. 3 days later, it was there. So it's that support that really helps us and strengthens us and gives us the power to do so. An important thing that we have to all remember, and I don't know if in the crowd here we have representatives of technologies or you're in contact with technologies, but we are in the technological era. We're talking about it every year here at Zero Project, and not necessarily in the context of emergencies. But I can tell you that one of the things that we have seen up close is that many times a technology does not begin to, is not developed so it will help in times of emergency, but in real time, it does. And it's very important for us to make sure that every technology that we see, that we meet, that we develop, we ask ourselves, how can it help? And I can give you a couple of examples. There's an Israeli technology, Ta'al, who has presented at Zero Project in the past. I think originally it started by providing a way with pictures and step-by-step instructions for people with cognitive disability on how to work. If you're working in a, I don't know, in a fast food, a real step-by-step, wash your hands, take the chips, put them in the oil, open the bag, etc. It was very important for people with cognitive disability to really receive that reassurance that they're not skipping a step and they're doing everything right. In times of emergency, we came to them and said, guys, we want this. Go into a building, take the pictures, make it visible, and show a person with cognitive disability step by step how to leave the building, how to go and be safe. And this works. If there's an application for sign language that is supposed to help in day-to-day conversations, I can tell you that I think I told the story last year, but when I was in one of the refugee centers in Ukraine, in Poland, and there was an elderly lady, deaf. Nobody could speak to her. She didn't know how to write, and she was really in stress. Contacting that technology, that application, in 2 minutes we knew what she wants to say. So it's very important to look at every technology and see the context of emergency and see if that can help.
Excellent points, thank you. We have a question in the back of the room, please.
There is, okay. This is not so much a question, but for folks who are working on emergency or relief efforts, look at the GARI, which is a Mobile World Forum. They have a database of all the accessibility features are in common cell phones. So there are often tools that are available in your devices that are in hands of people all over the place that can provide accessibility. So definitely look there as a resource.
This is Marcie speaking, and thank you, Susan. I believe Susan said that the resources from GARI, which is an organization that brings together all of the wireless communications information and provides accessibility information about every telephone. And they as well have assembled a list of the emergency features of the phones. Susan, did I get that right? Yeah, okay. And Michael, I believe you have a question.
Thank you. A question to you, Vicky. Thanks a lot for your presentation, your engagement. What really struck me was this kind of, 40% of all hospital cases being diabetes. It's really like, whoa, it's a stunning figure. Also that 17% of those are probably due to amputations. And obviously there's a huge need to deal with a topic of disability, but I would say the even bigger need is the topic of prevention. And is there, do you have an overview of what is being done in this direction?
Yeah, definitely. Non-communicable diseases, NCDs, are a huge health issue in the Pacific. It's a combination of genetic, environment, etc. And I know there are many, many different organizations, whether it's UN-led or NGO-led, trying to get good health information across the country, different Pacific nations. It's also hard because there's a lot of infrastructure barriers. It's hard to go from, one island to another to spread the information in an easy way. Access to food isn't always available because the nearest grocery or nearest market is twice a week on a different lagoon, there is a limitation on the kind of food you can access. But definitely this is something that is on the top of the agenda of many different health organizations in the Pacific. The 40% statistic was from Fiji, and it might be like, the first person go, and also because it's people seeking medical help late. They don't because when they are in a low resource setting, there's no free public health or very limited public health facilities available, so they seek help really late. And so it could be one day coming in and maybe amputating a toe, and then the next day the same person going in amputating a foot, and that's also contributing to that statistic as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of our speakers. We have one more question, and then we're going to be very fortunate to have a graphic facilitation summary of the discussion. But first we'll go to
Sorry, may I interrupt? I think we don't, unfortunately, have time for the last question. Maybe you can present. We only have 2 minutes left.
Oh.
I'm very, very sorry.
2 minutes.
Okay.
2 minutes is very short. Okay, let's see if the camera can catch it. So everybody can see, and you will be able to see this later. I have to come to this side. I'm sorry, I have to cover your space. All right, so I'll just do the summary of the summary. From what we heard, in order to be prepared for people with disabilities to survive climate change and other disasters that are going on in the world, I think we heard a lot of good examples on how things have been tested, how they have been implemented. And the summary of the summary, and if you want to learn more, you can come and see me after, is we need to be prepared. So, for instance, on islands that are now already facing climate change, we have to start adapting to these climate change effects. We have to make sure people are included in the world and in the workspace and in their communities, so they are part of the world and the life. If disaster strikes, we need real-time assistance. We need to be aware that we need emergency evacuation, but there were some really tragic numbers we heard. For example, for 17% it's difficult to be evacuated, and we heard that about 6% of people with disabilities cannot even be evacuated. So there needs to be measures in place where we can make sure this doesn't happen. And after the disaster hits and people are being evacuated, for instance, we heard about missing showers and accessible toilets in places where you're evacuated to. So there needs to be assistance and accessibility. And I think last but not least, to go back to life as normal as possible and going back, maybe, hopefully, to a world that has been inclusive from the beginning. One last message, because I think that's really key. Many of you said the people with disabilities don't only have to be at the table, but they have to be top of the table. So they know what is needed and what has to be done. And yeah, many more really interesting inputs today. Thank you very much. That's it from me.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Thank you all very much. We appreciate your time, and thank you to the Zero leadership for giving us this time and space to share this important conversation. Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
The glasses are really beautiful. Really, you changed it, right?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.